So let me briefly introduce our panel here, and then we will get started. First here on the left, we have Jonathan Norton. First of all, I should say we have three, I just confirmed, we have three Texas-born playwrights. Here on the left, we have Jonathan Norton. Jonathan grew up here in Dallas, in Oak Cliff, and he has...
Pleasant Grove?
What? Pleasant Grove?
Yes.
So sorry. A little east of Oak Cliff.
I know.
But Jonathan has been here in Dallas as a professional playwright for several years now. And the most exciting thing is that tomorrow, believe it or not, he will finally have his world premiere of Penny Candy, beginning rehearsal at the Dallas Theater Center downtown. That's a play that's been in the works for several years now. I have listened to a couple of readings of it. It is a phenomenal play that is going to blow the socks off of Dallas, I think. It is set here in Dallas. It's a great little piece. We're very excited to have Jonathan Norton. Next we have Janielle Kastner. Janielle also grew up here in the Metroplex, in the Mid-Cities, I believe, which is where my wife grew up as well. But Janielle is, Janielle does many things, I believe. She, what do you do with your podcast? What is
I'm
this?
a podcast producer and a host.
Podcast producer and host. She is a sometime actor, and she lately has been writing really, really good and exciting plays. She's currently under commission at the Dallas Theater Center, and I'd like to announce for the very first time for you all, if you will help me keep this under your hats for a couple months until we're ready to announce our full 2020 season. Next season, we will present the world premiere of Janielle's play Sweet Pea, that we are very, very finally, we have Mr. Blake Hackler. Blake was born in Amarillo, Texas, and grew up there before moving and living in Chicago and New York. Blake and I went to graduate school together up north, and we have been close friends since. He moved down here a few years ago and is on the faculty at SMU. Blake does all of the things. Blake is an amazing director. He is a master teacher of acting. He is one of the best actors I know. He's currently rehearsing a play that I'm directing here for this company, the Churchill One Acts, which will open in about a month. And he does all sorts of other things that would surprise you. He's a proficient violinist, believe it or not. All sorts of stuff that would blow your mind. But he's here tonight because he is one of the most exciting playwrights here in this area. If you've been around for the last couple of years, you will know that we have presented 2 world premieres in the last 2 seasons by Blake, The Necessities, and then last season's Enemies People. And in a few short months, we will begin rehearsal for a 3rd world premiere by Blake Hackler called What We Were. That's going to be presented here in late August, September, before it moves to Circle Theater for our first co-production with Circle Theater in Fort Worth. Please join me in welcoming these 3 fabulous
Thanks for the invitation. First of all, this is the most fun thing I could be asked to do because all 3 of these people are good talkers. So I'm just gonna set them up and let them go. I hope that as we get toward the last 10 or 15 minutes, they'll be willing to open it up to you all for some questions, etc. But I wanted to start by saying I'd like to know from each of you the first time you either put pen to paper or maybe more likely fingers to keyboard and wrote dialogue. And whether you knew that was going to be a play or not, or whether something started happening that was speaking through you in some strange way. Go.
We both looked at you first.
Oh, you did? Okay, yes, you did. Well, actually, I kind of have perhaps maybe 2. Mm-hmm. One is very I was in elementary school, just blah, 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 blah. And then I think the other was perhaps much more intentional or much more of a conscious realization of sorts. But when I was in elementary school, oftentimes whenever we had a chance to do some sort of project where it was we just kind of do whatever we want or what have you. somehow or another for me it would always involve like writing a scene or a monologue or something, although I had no knowledge that that's actually what it was called, you know. So always like trying somehow to use that to get out of doing actual work
Yep.
in the class. So that was that, and then, but I think in a much more intentional kind of aha moment type way. I was in a production of Joe Turner's Come and Gone at Theater 3 when I was 15, and to pass the time backstage, I would write. Of course, I was so influenced by this beautiful language and this beautiful poetry that I not only had the opportunity to speak, but also the chance to hear, like through the PA system backstage. So I would just start writing scenes and monologues and kind of started there. And I would like grab actors in the show and like make them perform it for me. and Vicky Washington.
You were that 15-year-old.
I was that 15-year-old. And Vicky Washington, who is like one of my greatest mentors and great collaborators, she was in Joe Turner's. And she always tells the story about how they got to the point where they would start hiding. So they're like, he's coming, lock the door. It's scripted, and who wants to read it?
Well, if you're listening to August Wilson's words every night through a PA, you're either
Right.
incredibly inspired to write or never ever think
Ever in your life.
So that says a lot. Janielle?
I was in acting school as an undergrad, and I loved writers and I loved writing, but I was terrified of doing dialogue for some reason. I think I respected it so much, I was too afraid to like call myself a writer, but I was looking for monologues, and I hated all the monologues that we had in our library because all the women were, I would love a monologue and then get to the end and it would be like, and as a 45-year-old woman, I'd be like, all the young women monologues were like women who were morally correct. Joe, when you broke up with me, here's what you did wrong. You better get your act together, protagonist, when they leave it. Or they were like really sexy and their like only objective was like to sex, like to seduce, like that's all they were doing. I just hated what was available, or they were crying about an abortion. That's all I could find. And so I started writing my own monologues, and then I put it together in a one-woman show. And then I kept writing more and more characters for women, and then I realized my writing was outpacing my acting. I was writing better characters than I could actually act. I outpaced. And so then I started writing, and then I started thinking of that feeling I would get when I noticed something and it felt like I was the only person who noticed it, and no one else noticed it. And I started chasing that feeling more, which led to me writing characters that weren't me, I couldn't play if I wanted to. And so then I started realizing I needed more actors to work with me too. Luckily I was in college, so I had like New Visions, New Play Festivals, different things like that to try out my writing on. But something felt so right, and I realized I had been acting like a writer. Like I knew how to follow punctuation. I always knew what playwrights were trying to do, and I always knew at the table when people were doing what the playwright wasn't doing. So I was like, there's a comma there though. And so I started writing myself, and it just felt so great, and all of a sudden my world felt so much bigger. I felt like, as a young woman, you think like, what roles can I play and all of a sudden I was like, I can write my whole life. It just felt like finding a whole livelihood.
I feel like lots of young actors feel like the way to sound hip as young actors avoid all punctuation. I've never known a playwright who likes that approach. If I put it there, it's for a reason. Blake?
I guess I was in elementary school and we had a story contest. And I always was telling stories to my mother and writing, but we had to write a story, and so I wrote a story about an abusive daycare teacher named Ren Cathy. And there was it was a mixed genre because it was fiction and then there were actual scenes in it. And we all had to read the stories in front of the whole class, and then the class voted, and whatever story won was going to be read at the assembly. And my story won by an overwhelming majority, and it was not allowed to be read at the assembly.
Yes!
Because it was too disturbing.
You were branded early.
I was branded early, yes. Yeah. So that was the first time.
Amarillo.
Yes. Yeah, They tried to keep me down.
They tried to keep you down. The next thing, truly, I want to leap into, which is sort of it's a large question. So I'm going to let you sort of spin it the way you want to. Is just take us through your process a little bit. In other words, do ideas come to you? You make notes for weeks and months and years, and you research, or does it tend to come as sort of a tsunami of, oh crap, I just have to get this out of me, And does that change with the project? And anybody can start. We don't have to go in order. Janielle, you want to take this one first? How does it usually get rolling?
I usually start with like a power dynamic I can't figure out. There's just like a feeling up against a feeling, and it starts feeling itchy. And so I start trying to figure out what those two things are fighting about. Like that sounds so vague, but that's kind of just how it feels, and they start to take the shape of words. So it's like arguments I'm having in my head between two concepts that sometimes are people that both seem valid or that both scare me. So I start putting it out in words, and then inevitably at some point, that's usually, it comes out in a torrent at first, and then it all looks really good, and then it all looks like it's a perfect idea, and I don't want to touch it, because it has to get so much worse before it gets better. Like you have to break it, and so I don't want to break it, so I'll have to do the work of sitting down and doing the work, and then from there on out, after that first big burst, it's just work. It's just, I have 3 hours set aside, I'm going to work for an hour, and then do something else for an hour, and come back and work for an hour. It's just mundane there.
So to my follow-up question is, so construction is something that you are led to via the 2 points of energy or conflict?
Yeah.
Knowing a bit about your writing, I'm like, yeah, it always feels there's clear plot, characters want something from one another, but it seems to start with the place of the immovable object and to some degree. So does that get really messy in the middle of it when you're?
Yeah, because inevitably at some point I want to start like writing something that's like really smart, and I want to like wow people, or like I want to like prove a point, and then the words start shriveling up. And then I'll start being like, whatever, it's just like a light, whatever, and I'll make people happy, and then the words start shriveling up. And I have to ask myself this question, which is what actually scares me, not what do I think should scare me. Like, what do I actually care about, not what I think I should care. Like, I should be writing a global warming play. I don't care. I care about, like, why did this person I thought loved me, where were they able to move on if they loved me? Mm-hmm. That's what I care about a lot of. So I have to get back to what I'm actually on about inside the piece, and then usually something braver, more vulnerable, and scarier starts to take shape, and usually that's how I figure out where they're going towards. It's by going down the paths that would be a little easier than retracking and then chasing that scary thing.
Yeah. Have you written something that you knew from the word go was autobiographical?
No, so it's really hard for me to make plays are hard to make. They're so hard to make. They're so much harder than a lot of other things to make, that I have tended to ask myself, like, does this have to be a play?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a play.
Right.
Can it live in any other medium? Because those have, for me, been easier to get made in the world.
Could it be a podcast?
Yes, exactly. Yep. And so I'm working on the podcast I'm working on is nonfiction memoir, because I realized the story that I was on about wasn't inherently theatrical. It was deeply intimate. So it could have been a one-woman show, and I could have added theatricality, but it was just a voice in your ear going through a 4-year-long grieving process in 10 episodes. So the words wanted to be that, and so that was, I could just let it be autobiographical.
Yeah.
So everything else hasn't been autobiographical for me.
Well, Jonathan, I'm going to go to you next only because the piece that you're about to go into rehearsal for, that's been developing for quite some time, has an autobiographical bent, although that's not necessarily true of all your work. So tell us about process. What's the? I have to get it out of me and put it on paper.
Well, typically for me, my process, it involves asking myself the question, what is it that I want to do next? And then also the flip side of that is, what is it that I'm not interested in doing? Mm-hmm. And so usually it kind of follows, or it's somehow in conversation with whatever I'm working on at that moment, but it's something that takes me in a completely different direction than whatever that is. Yeah. So it could be something such as, such and such and such is really like kind of like naturalistic, and it follows like this linear thing. So I kind of want to find something different. Right? So it's almost this thing of me like putting out there like what I'm interested in next without knowing actually what that would be. Mm-hmm. But it could be something as simple as it's nonlinear. I no more than five characters. I'd like to do something maybe it all takes place in the evening. I don't know why. All in the evening. I don't know. And it's like this kind of list of things, and I don't know what it's going to be. And then I start filtering through like maybe ideas I've had in the past, like those ideas that you have, like, and it passes.
Yep.
So I try and go back to some of those, and sometimes that's
So sometimes it's helpful to put a bunch of parameters around
right,
it, so
right.
that you sort of have to,
and so
filter
it just
down.
kind of builds from those parameters.
Yeah.
And then eventually I'll find something that feels like it kind of aligns.
Yeah.
It's almost like going shopping for a play, but you don't quite, like, you know what you want, but you don't quite know what it is yet. But yeah.
Well, I'm going to put a pin in it and come back, because I think that fascinating in the two of you were Jonathan and Janielle, that often I find that with you, Jonathan, you looked at a big idea, a moment in time, the issue that haunted us for decades, and then you pull it down to a personal. You managed to tell it in a very personal way, and that's we have historically some amazing versions of this play. So I want to come back to that. But now, The Boy from Amarillo. After you scared your school, you discovered your process in what way?
Well, I think there's two parts. So there's the inspiration of why one begins a play, so that's a question, and then my process. So the inspiration part of it is just usually, very often they come from Texas Monthly articles. And now I have like 4 friends who are sending me articles all the time, being like, this is your play.
Yeah.
This is your play. Right? But a lot of times it just comes from where it begins is a single image, or a song, and then that, and so then I put, for What We Were, which many people see, hopefully, all of you, I hope, started, with an article I read, and then I got an image of 3 women on the verge of adulthood in a parking lot, and then it started there. And then my process, I can't, but the way that my schedule works, I can't afford to be very precious with the process. I have to say, like, okay, I have this project and this project and this one and this one. So now I have a month and a half. And I have from 7 p.m. till 8:30 p.m. 3 nights a week. And that's when the play will get written. And so then I do that, And
Again, parameters.
Yeah, and again, it's like things like I don't believe in writer's block. I don't believe in sort of inspiration, I believe that you sit down in the chair and you do something. And I believe, these people who come up and like, oh, I've had an idea for a play, I've been writing this play for 20 years, and I want to say, you're not actually writing anything anymore. Do you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Sure. I mean, it's like, well, okay, but...
Having a good 20-year conversation.
I mean, I think anyone can get a first draft of a play down in a month. Whether that draft is good, probably not.
But does that grow out, like, for your also belief system of, for the love of God, get it out there so you can begin to play
Yes,
it?
I mean, Paula Vogel says that if a draft takes you longer than a month, then it's not a play that you should write. People are going to have a lot of different, but I happen to subscribe to that. I mean, so I get it out, and I don't write sequentially. I don't write in a linear fashion. Writing linear plays is difficult for me because it's not the way that I experience life, and so that I just simply write the next thing I know that happens. And so I'll write a scene, and then I usually by the end of that scene I know, oh, this scene might take place, but it might not be the next thing,
Yeah.
And or I'll say, okay, what are the next 10 scenes I could write, and then I'll write a list, and then I'll write, 4-line versions of those scenes, and then when I'm done, what it usually means is in my process is that I write far too much material. So for something like The Necessities, was that a good example? For The Necessities, like with the play came in at like 90 pages, and I probably had 200 pages for that. And so I lay it all out and then I reorganize things, right?
Yeah.
But the other benefit of that is that usually when I'm done with my first draft, it's really like close to my final draft. So that it's,
Yeah.
because I made a lot of choices
I got to make a ballet with Agnes DeMille once, and there was way too much choreography. You know, I mean, you were aware that you were making sort of bundles of choreography, and she said, yeah, it's like dough. I mean, there's good dough, and I roll it out, and then I cut the cookies, and the rest of it, it's fun, but I don't need it. So, you know,
yeah, absolutely.
So now to sort of spin on that, since all three of you have described a sort of slightly different process with some connective tissue, what is the thing that, if someone said, you're now independently wealthy, you've won the lottery, in fact, what we'd love for you to do is go to Cape Cod, we've got a great cabin for you, and you don't have to do anything but write plays. Would you kill yourself, or would that be like, praise Jesus, that's what I've waited for my whole life?
I had an interesting thing that happened this last year.
Avoiding the question is also valid.
No, actually, this answers it in a way. I was awarded a MacDowell, which is
It's a very big.
it's an artist's residency in New Hampshire, and it's been around for a long time, and it's totally funded. You go, you get a month. You're there with other artists who, in my group, there were Pulitzer Prize winners, and National Book Award winners, Tony winners. And you go, and they take total care of you, and all you have to do is write. And at the time period I was awarded it for, my mother was very ill, so I could not go during that time. But they were great, and they were like, we can reschedule for you. Mm-hmm. And so I had my sort of year lined up, but I could have taken the time off, and the school said I could take the time off, and I could have gone. Then I had an opportunity to be cast in 12th Night, so it was like, oh, I'm either going to do 12th Night or I'm going to go to the MacDowell. And there was something so scary to me about my productivity is related to working all the time and having other things. And there was something really deeply anxiety-inducing about being like, oh, I would have all this space and a month.
Yeah, sounds terrifying.
And it really did. I mean, I really, really had a great deal of anxiety in it. And part of the choice to stay in town and do 12th Night was simply because that was the easier thing to do and the less scary thing, you know?
Which, given your part in 12th Night, is... that's funny, most people would run screaming from Sir Andrew Aguichi, but Janielle, yeah?
I would.
You win the lottery.
Yeah, I think that would be wonderful for me for exactly 6 weeks, and then peace out. I found that I write really well from loneliness. That like I can't write with music, I can't write at a coffee shop, people are too interesting. I just be really lonely at my desk and have that feeling that all the kids are playing at recess and I'm inside. And then from that lonely feeling, I start reaching, and that reach is usually the really generative, creative reach. I did a 10-day silent writers retreat with a playwright named Eric and I was terrified of that because I am loquacious. And what I immediately learned was I liked all the writers better when we weren't talking. It was awful when we started talking, it was so violent. When we were silent, I realized that I use like language and I use human interaction to really offset shame in all kinds of ways I didn't realize. Like I had this experience where there was salsa, someone made nachos, like a person from like Rhode Island made nachos. I was like, these are nachos. And there's salsa, so I went to the fridge and got salsa. It was just cheese on chips, whatever. So I got the salsa from the fridge, and then I realized, oh, the chef has like allotted our meals. This salsa might be for another purpose. And then I thought, well, I'll just dole some out for myself. That won't hurt anybody. But then I thought, they're going to see me come back to the table with salsa on my plate without having offered it to anyone else. What will they think of me then? And I realized, oh my God, I have no faculties to offset my shame. I have to just make a decision for myself about salsa. And so I did, and it sorted itself out. Someone got up, got the salsa, poured it, the chef did, so it was great. They picked up, and I realized, oh my God, I exist with humans to make my, oh, wow. And so I said what I wrote, that was the first draft of Sweet Pea, was at that writer's retreat. And inside Sweet Pea, there's a lot of mitigating of shame, exercising of shame, people reckoning with their own shame, and I think that was directly related. I walked into a room, and I couldn't say, oh my God, are you sitting there? Can I sit there? Is it okay if I sit near you? I just had to sit, be like, if someone else was sitting here, they'll have to deal with it. And I was like, is this how men feel all the time? I'll just do it, and people will probably sort themselves out around me because I want to do this thing. It was amazing. And so, yes, so that process taught me that like I like my own company. I actually like the inside of my own mind. I can stay there for a while and generate stuff, and then eventually I need to go like be held and touched and stuff. So I would love it for 6 weeks and then get me back with the people.
6 weeks sounds terrifying, but I'm
6 weeks is
I'm
amazing.
impressed. I'm impressed.
Yeah.
I'm impressed. Jonathan, you won the lotto. It's only Playwright.
I, of course, would love the money. And very grateful for the money, and would take the money. Not a fan of nature.
Really? Not at all?
Unless it's like in the middle of the city.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This is good.
I can deal with
Partitioned
it.
off part.
First of all, because I'm a child of the 80s, very much a child of the 80s, and I was allowed to sneak into one too many horror films when I was little. They all took place like
They
in
did.
the woods,
Yes.
somewhere.
Yeah.
So I've never been a big. And then also like every fearful thing that I have associated with like it's always like a dark night or something like. I remember when I was. I remember the movie Mississippi Burning came out, and at the beginning of Mississippi Burning, there's the scene where civil rights workers are driving down that long, dark Mississippi road, and they get pulled over and murdered, right? Although technically it didn't quite happen like that in real life, but that's the movie, right? And so at that time, my family, we were living in Red Oak, and so we'd go from Pleasant Grove to Red Oak like every night, late at night, and it's driving down a long, dark road. And so every single night on the way home, I was positive that we were going to be pulled over by the Klan and murdered. So I still have this very weird. So like if I was like out in the woods someplace at night,
See.
I'd do practice. But about the thing about having time and money and opportunity, right? And that would of course be an enormous gift. But what I'm dealing with now is figuring out, because like something you said about working and like how you have to work to like those two things kind of like live side by side, and one I would assume one kind of fuels the other in a certain kind of way. I'm trying to figure out how I would navigate that, because I still go back and forth between SMU and DTC, and mostly at SMU. And a few months ago, I was at DTC, so I had meetings, and I took the day off, so it's like DTC most of the day. And I was sitting at the little desk, the little hoteling desk or whatever, and I remember feeling so guilty. Because like I'm looking, and everybody around me is like busy with stuff to do, and they're working, and like, generating revenue of some sort or whatever, I don't know. And I'm sitting there like, I'm going to write a play, and I'm looking at people like working. And what was weird about that is that that's what I do at work, is I write. And so they joke about me not working at work, right?
Yeah.
So they're like, are you working or are you writing? I'm like, I'm working, like that. And they know that I'm not. They say I co-op.
Yeah.
Because out of that thing, Common Desk downtown.
Yeah.
So I visited there once. Okay, I know I'm rambling, but there's a point to it. So I visited Common Desk a few years ago, and I was like so blown away by it, right? And so the next day, that Monday, I go back to work, and I'm like, oh my God, you guys, I went to this really cool place. It's like, there's like this big office area, and there's like a desk, and you can sit there and like do your writing, and you can get free coffee, and you just sit there and work, and there's a copier, and you can do like print all your stuff, and it's so cool. And my boss looks at me and like, she's like, and how is that different than what you do here?
There's over there.
I know. And so it's trying to navigate how I feel about that thing of the support you need to write versus the community you need to write.
Yeah.
How do you balance that? So that's that weird space.
There's also nothing sexier than cheating on the thing you're supposed to be doing with something else.
Right.
So like I have to prepare for classes tomorrow, but instead I'm gonna write my play. Like I don't know, something about your play being the other lover can feel really good. Then when it's your full-time job and it's just your spouse, and you're like, I guess I have to do this.
Well, I hesitate, but I'm going to move us to a topic that is the other part of having the gall to write plays, which is, as Janielle so beautifully put, it's really hard to write plays. It's probably even harder to get them on a stage. So I'd love to hear a little bit from you all about, and maybe specific to Dallas-Fort Worth, since well, I'm gonna have to find a local writer. Feels like to me we've pinned you in the DFW area, and you can't go run amok.
Y'all have gotten produced a lot more than me, so maybe I'll take the worst case scenario side of it. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll take that.
There you go.
I found Dallas to be has tremendous amount of creative blank space. There's so much space just to invent something and do it. So I'm from like a stock of like SME theater kids who decided to stick around and decided to just make stuff from scratch that we didn't see happening in our community. And that was really incredible, and I picked great collaborators, and they're all at grad school or major market cities now, successful. Like, yeah, I picked up great people,
Sure.
and I'm still here. So I have found when I want to invent something that doesn't exist, I have great support. I got an amazing grant to do like this large-scale text-based installation last year, more money than I've ever gotten before, to do this like, insane thing that I was inventing from scratch. Like Shakespeare in the Bar, we had like an arts incubation group called Tribe that was inventing all kinds of weird stuff. Love it. When it comes to like doing conventional plays in a space with air conditioning and someone who like hands you a program, like that for me, I haven't found like really infrastructure that's ready to go for me to get it on its feet. It's just a harder thing to get done. So my worst experiences have been having something that I know is good and knowing my instincts are good, and I've gotten it as good as I can get it alone at my desk. I need a director to help me, and so I'll be asking them to work for free. Or I need actors to try it out, so I will be asking my actor friends to work for wine. Or I've gotten a developmental opportunity. I'm like, awesome, I'll use this time, which is space and actors and a director, to break open my play, only to find out that developmental actually means we just wanted to show your play really good as it already is for a bunch of people to maybe won't. So maybe we can see if they like your play so we can do it next year. I thought it was for development, and it wasn't.
You thought development, and they meant backers audition.
Yeah, exactly. And so I misgauging that. So having any infrastructure for actually breaking open an idea that's as good as I can get it, and now it needs more. I haven't had much institutional support yet. I also don't have, exception of one piece, anything that's on my desk that I'm waiting to get done. It's all going to go somewhere just in a couple years. A couple exciting things that will get done. So I don't feel, I'm not like a bitter writer who has scripts that are like, why isn't anyone doing this? As fast as I've written them, the things that I have ready will have a home in the next 2 years. But that help, breaking it open with people who aren't me is so useful. And so hopefully I get more institutional buy-in over the next couple of years. So people who trust me enough to break it open. Because it just, sometimes the first draft sometimes looks amazing. Sometimes it has amazing, great kernels. And you're also at the mercy of who is trusted when the piece is kind of messy but has great kernels. There's some people who get trusted more. There's genius in there. And there's some people, women sometimes don't get trusted as much. They accidentally made something good. Jane Austen accidentally put that together. Her irony, she didn't mean the irony. No, Mark Twain has a whole thing about how she accidentally wrote stuff she meant on purpose. So that's a thing. I've been really fortunate. I have this great cool project that's the Dallas Morning News. I've been shadowing Dallas Morning News with a fellow playwright for the past year, and we spent like 100 plus hours talking to journalists. We're going to put it up, and we might have a place to do it that's like institutionally backed. And then all of a sudden, someone got this great idea, like, what if we did it like in the Dallas Morning News, like an immersive walkthrough? And I was like, no! I almost had people with badges.
Yep.
And a lighting grid.
Those playbills almost had it.
That seems so avant-garde and cool and sexy, and that's not sexy to me anymore. I want
Good old-fashioned kind of
good
stuff.
old-fashioned stuff.
Well, now I'm going to turn to Blake for a moment, who has been produced, I think in part because you've had longtime collaborators who are
and I think,
intrigued with looking to you because there's so much.
And I think in many ways, like that may be the only reason that I've gotten produced so much, And I think that with what we were, I have had amazingly 3 plays in 3 years here, and that's been such a gift. And but when I write, I'm slightly different. I write and I don't expect my plays to ever be done. And and so that gives me a kind of autonomy when I write something to be like, okay, I'm just going to write it. And
it feels good to you one way or the other.
Yeah, like for instance, this past year, in August of this year, I have 2 plays that I had been working on, and I just stopped and I was like, do you know what? I'm not going to write a play for at least a year. I'm just going to stop.
Okay.
And instead, I've been writing poetry, and I've written 350, 400 poems. And people keep asking me, are you going to send these out? Are you going to send these out? And I don't plan to. I mean, it's just like I need to write, and I'm writing these things, and eventually might. But it's not contingent on them being seen.
Sure.
I've been incredibly privileged for them to be seen here.
Yeah.
I would love for the plays that I really love to be seen other places, you know?
Yeah.
I don't have it in me to do the kind of self-promotion work that some people are really good at. You know, when I was graduating from Yale, there was a big push. We do this horrible thing called the showcase. And all the actors and all the managers and all the studios and all the agents in New York and LA basically come into one room in New York and LA, and you have 6 minutes to sell yourself.
Yeah.
And I did really well in those.
Yeah.
And I had people in LA being like, you know, what do you want? You should come out here. And I knew, I was like, this is so exciting, and I do not have the ability to capitalize on this.
Yeah.
This is not who I am. This is not my skill set. And so I've been lucky again. I've not had a bad collaboration. You know, the things I've done here have all been great. I had some of my plays I developed up in Ashland, Oregon. They could not have taken better care of me. I had plays done in New York at several theaters, very small ones, but that really took care of me. I had a play that was done last year at Yale Cabaret, and even though they, you know, have like 1 hour of rehearsal at 3 in the morning and blah blah blah, they could not have been more, you know.
Sure.
So I've been really lucky in terms of that, and
Well, that actually I think brings up too, since you guys have been produced or will be produced here, but the fact that Dallas is really, I think, just now in many ways trying to figure out how to support playwrights, which
It's
means
such a
more
big
than
push,
producing
yeah.
them. It
Yeah.
means
It's been
trying to get their work out and farther, like
Yeah.
we don't have a major new works festival
Yeah.
here. And there are lots of them around the country, and so you're always in this sort of like, should there be another one? Do we need another new playwrights festival? Or should we try to be getting our playwrights known at Humana or at Denver? You know, I mean, it's a conundrum. And so now I'm going to go to Jonathan, who, you know, you very much know the sort of grist mill of how long it takes to get a place the size of the Dallas Theater Center to sort of go, we're doing it. So tell me what's your worst horror story and or best? Actually, you just answer the question any way you want to. What is Dallas? How can Dallas get better at supporting?
Well, I do have a horror story. Well, not really a horror story.
In
A
the
worst
woods.
thing. I
Gonna
once
make a
had
great
a
point.
director tell me that the reason no one was coming, that the reason why the houses were poor or whatever, was because I wasn't August Wilson.
Wow.
Like, she just straight up said that to me. Like, oh, you're not August Wilson.
Meaning not enough fame or not the ability.
No, the name.
Yeah.
You're just literally not August
Yeah.
Wilson.
No one
Yeah.
else is
Like-
August Wilson.
well,
Yeah.
That's a rude metaphor.
Yeah.
because there's only space for one playwright of color. It's
Right,
basically-
right, that's
Right.
right.
Yeah,
Right.
the embedded
Right.
racism in that is
Yeah.
not real.
What is
Yeah.
an acronym?
Yeah, really? Well, Jesus.
I mean,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
well, I mean, first of all, I think that what's exciting, what's happening now, is in terms of like support and funding for new work in the city, which is really cool and very much necessary. And I'm a beneficiary of that, so I'm so grateful for it. I think that what we could do better and what is needed at this time, what I wish for, would be more artist-centric support and artist-centric and focused support, because right now what exists is basically funding being funneled through the organizations, and then it's a conversation between the organization and the playwright about how that funding is dispersed and used and payment and what have you and that whole thing. And there are times when it can cause you to feel that's almost a somewhat parasitic type relationship or lifestyle, because you feel like your existence depends upon feeding off of this, entity or this larger organization, or even a smaller organization, or a mid-sized organization, because that's where the money is being channeled through. So finding or creating more opportunities for artist-centric support and funding in such a way that, an example I always like to give is, for instance, the National, which gives out like this huge, lovely $100,000 prize every year, which I'm not hating on at all. We bring amazingly talented sculptors and artists here to Dallas that kind of enlarges the conversation, right, for our community. However, I always like to think, if you could imagine, even if you were to take $100,000 and like maybe split that between like 4 artists in the community, or 4 playwrights in the community, or 4 a playwright and a musician, or what have you, but how even that amount of money as unrestricted to an extent, right, so that artists can actually be trusted to use that money in the best way that they see fit to support themselves in their career and their livelihood, and what have you. Like, for instance, when you were speaking earlier about, you write a play, and then if you get it up, that means putting the play up and not paying your friends, or not.
I was saying to get it good enough for someone else to want to do it.
To want to do
a lot of work.
But at least if you have like the resources to like have your own agency and have funding to do things at a somewhat larger level, or even like, for instance, for me now, it's a lot about I hate the word networking. That word actually. But it's a lot of like travel and just getting out there and meeting people.
Relationships.
Yeah, that's a huge thing, and it actually costs money to do that to the extent that I think it would be effective. And also, I sometimes feel that artists, sometimes it can feel awkward because you feel like there's a lack of trust in terms of what artists can do or are capable of, or the extent of responsibility that we're capable of shouldering. And one of my sheroes, Vicky Washington, Vicky Washington too, but the other Vicky Washington, we call her Vicky Short, which is Vicky Meeks, the South Dallas Cultural Center. They produced my play Mississippi Goddamn like 4 years ago or whatever, and so it was South Dallas Cultural Center is a city facility, right? So they get like a chunk of money from OCA, so they got that pot of money. And then I would say we get a grant from Mid-America Arts Alliance, it was like $15,000, so we had that pot of money. And that was like, great, we have this, it was like $30,000, which for like a small company, theater, whatever, it's like a nice piece of money to like mount the show with, right? So we get the money and I'm like, yay, this is awesome. And so basically she goes, and this belongs to you now. And like, she put it in my lap, and I was basically responsible for, I guess you would say, line producing the show, which is something I never wanted to do before. But it was an enormous education, and also it was really beneficial because I actually was controlling the purse strings, which is ultimately a really useful and incredible thing in terms of like the vision that I had, and actually having the agency and being in control of how the money is spent to actually make that be what I wanted it to be. And it was a great gift that she gave to me, in part because she was like, nobody else here knows how to do this.
So here you go.
You figure it out. Here's the money, figure it out.
Well, I want to throw open for some questions, but I want to say that part of what I find fascinating about what each of you sort of talked about in a slightly different way is that there's, structures grow up around anything, whether that's creating art, funding art, supporting art. And I would say it's just true that right now across America, most foundations, et cetera, turn to an organization because they have enough infrastructure and a development department, and we have some of those amazing fundraisers here to be able to put together the grant and put together this PowerPoint and put together. But it is interesting to me that often there's a lot of people in between the person interested in creating some funding and the actual artist.
Right.
And so one of my goals over my next decade is to just help artists understand more about sort of budgets and funding paths and grants and all that, but also to see if some of the benefactors and some of the artists can know each other a little more directly without so many matchmakers. You know, we just don't need that many Dolly Levi's. We've got a lot of them taking a little bit off the top. And the other,
But not Vicky.
that's right. No, clearly not.
Right, you're
But so I'd love to throw it open for some questions based on what you've heard tonight. Yes.
I have a question that may be based on an assumption that's incorrect. But I'm assuming that you're in effect a storyteller. Each of y'all are in effect storytellers. But you can tell your stories different ways. You do it as a playwright, you do it as a novelist, you might even take a short story, make a song, or a poem out of it. How do you choose that this is the form you're going to tell your story in? And then the substance of that is it purely your story, or do you have a vision of who the audience is?
My question is there something inherently theatrical about it that there's something that needs to be smelled, there's an interaction that needs to happen in front of people, that needs to be watched, that's scarier if it's live, there's something inside the thing that has a theatricality because then we've got to do it as a play. If not, like my example before the podcast, I realized what I wanted from this was to create intimacy with an audience. I realized, the vehicle can be inside one person's ears at a time. They can download at their leisure. So the question for me comes down to theatricality, because my favorite thing in the world is when we're all breathing in the dark and something happens and we all kind of like catch our breath at the same time, that feeling. You can have that feeling while watching Netflix too. It's different. So it's got to demand something for me in order for it to be a play. And then sometimes people tell you that it doesn't work and it should be something else. And if they're really smart and have good instincts and also have good work, I tend to listen to them. If they're telling me it needs to be flat prose, not a play. So that's me.
For me, it has to be a play because I suck at I suck at everything else. I'm not good at poetry. I don't have the attention span for prose or to write a short story or like the detail that I think it takes because to actually describe how blue the sky is or how green the grass is. I'm like, the grass is great. The grass is great. Okay, we can move on. More important parts of the story. Yes, I do. Yeah, it would be a play.
Mr. Hackler?
No, I think both answers are good. I mean,
That's a great answer.
I write plays because I can write plays. And, I think that I spent 3 years in the BMI Lemon Angle workshop, which is a musical theater writing workshop. And the question that we were always being asked when we decided to bring in something and musicalize it and make it a musical was, does this sing? Does this sing? Mm-hmm. And you start to learn that there are certain properties, certain stories that sing and certain stories that don't. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean one is better or worse than the other. It just means that this one doesn't sing. Mm-hmm. And sometimes when you see a musical, you can realize, you're like, oh, something's wrong, and it's that this story doesn't sing.
Right.
Do you know? I mean, they've been trying to make Alice in Wonderland a musical for years. They've been trying to make Peter Pan a musical for years, and so they did in one version sang, but Alice in Wonderland, they can't make that sing.
Right.
It doesn't want to sing. They just had a new version of it in New York, and
Well, and I think fascinatingly, and this is probably for a whole other hour, but because musicals, unless you're going to write book, lyrics, and music, require a writing team.
Yeah.
That's also another. I mean, I would love to know whether all three of you at some point are intrigued with, because that's a step into the great scary unknown to bring in other collaborators and be like, we're all going to put our name on this.
Well, so I've written 3 musicals, and it is a very different process, and especially the process between the lyricist. I was the lyricist, book writer, and the composer, and learning how that works. And one of the great things about BMI, we won't go down this road very long, but it was really amazing because the first year, the training is that it's this amazing free program in New York where you have to audition, and then once you're accepted, you are put with So in your first year, you get an assignment each week, and you're put with a different composer each week. So the first assignment is to write a song for Blanche in Streetcar. And then like the second assignment might be to write a charm
I've
song.
always depended on that.
Or like we had to musicalize the final scene of Death of a Salesman.
Yep.
But you get a new collaborator.
It sounds funny, but think of the plots of your favorite musicals.
You get a new collaborator each week.
Yeah.
And so you got to figure out really fast, blind date-wise, how to work with him. And then the next week you bring it in, and someone like Stephen Sondheim or Stephen Schwartz or Aaron Flaherty are there listening and being like, no, you know?
Sure.
So that was a great gift of like, yes, and learning how to say yes before you said no. And again, it's not precious. My writing is not precious.
Yeah.
You know, so that when I come to work with a collaborator or a director, you know, I hear about these playwrights who are like, no, you can't change that. And I'm like, I mean, you know, save your points. I mean, like, I know you can't change that, but you want to change that word, or you want, sure, great.
Well, I think part of one of the interesting answers that all of them have touched on is it's a lonely art form until suddenly it's hyper collaborative. Because you're all alone until suddenly there's a director and a design team and an actor and a producer and a line, you know, and then so it goes from a very alone exercise to a holy crap, can all these people leave me alone, you know, to some degree. Are there other questions? Yeah, Jim?
I've had a producer say, not at this theater, but a producer talk about the play and say it was workshop all the life out of the play. Not the play was fought, and now we got a new version. So how do you deal with workshopping and trying to figure out what's good and what's not good in the workshop?
Anne Bogart, who's a famous theater director, has this great thing that I don't think is always true, but I think is often true, which she says, when I get criticism on a production of mine, she says, if I'm like, oh, okay, great, then I don't pay attention to it. If it makes me really angry, then I actually pay attention to the one or two things that make me really angry, and I get really defensive about. And the other stuff just sort of rolls off. I think that's kind of a good rule of thumb, like. And also just smiling and nodding a lot. You know, being like, great, yeah, that's so great. Yes, thank you for that. You know, and then be like, whatever.
I will, Jim, say as a director and producer that you want playwrights to be pliable, but you're also praying that they're strong enough of will that there will be a point where they're like, it's my play.
Yeah, I don't need you to tell me how to write my play.
Yeah. I mean,
unless I ask.
The idea of a workshop is to discover things that will help the playwright, not beat them to death. So it's but you know, sometimes one almost feels like the other. Anything else?
There's an adage that I hear again and again, which is like, what's the note behind the note? And so someone will say like, oh, I really like hated that character. And I'm like, that's a useless note, but what it tells me, it's useless. But your experience wasn't wrong. You hated the person. Awesome. That's not, I don't need to make her more likable. That's the wrong note. The note is, you didn't understand why she was kind of also right. Like, that's what you did. You didn't understand why. It's okay if you don't like her, but like, there's onto something. So what's the note behind the note? What are they telling you behind the thing? And that's what I usually listen to. So I'm like, oh, tell me more about your experience of it. They'll be like, you should do this. I'm like, tell me more about what you experienced. And then usually I can reverse engineer. Oh, you just missed a step, and I can make that step clearer or not. I just have tried very hard to tell myself I never iron out magic. Like, there's magic stuff, and it's like, oh, how did that happen? Like, it wasn't really clear to me how she got what she needed, and it's like, I could go back and iron it for you, but it's magic. It's, I get, I think it's Jose Rivera says you get one magic thing for free in your play that you don't have to explain to anybody.
Yeah.
You don't have to explain to anybody.
No.
And if you have like 3 or 4, I mean, I had more magic in Sweet Pea I eventually cut, because like 3 or 4 I couldn't justify, so I kept to one magic thing, but yeah, I just don't iron that stuff out.
How is because you've just been through,
again and again.
A lot of workshops.
What seemed like 15 years of a play that really quite knew itself from very early on.
Yeah. It's but for me, I always look at workshops seriously. It's like this laboratory, and it's an opportunity to just throw so many things at the wall and see what sticks, and really see what sticks and what works and what doesn't work. and sometimes it just go completely outrageously crazy and rip stuff out and put it back together again. I think part is the only child in me because I grew up just like creating and doing things and tearing stuff up and putting it back together again. So I actually enjoy that.
Yeah.
But then what can be problematic is, or it's frightening or scary, is, as you brought up earlier, is that sense when you get to that point where someone's like, oh, but what about that thing that you started off with? Here's what I say, is that I feel like a workshop, when it is offered to a playwright in a very generous way and a very honest and authentic way, that this is just a space for you to work, for you to discover, for you to try new things, and if you blow up something, you always can go back to what you had, and that's accepted and that's encouraged, and you know that you feel safe that if you do destroy it, you can always find your way back. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes we have this workshop culture in the American theater now, and it's just become an understood thing by so many playwrights that, oh, I have to go and get my play workshop, and I have to find somewhere to get my play read. Just, in some cases, just to get attention for it and get people to know about it and get into the right circles and what have you. But people are sometimes doing that and not actually taking the opportunity for what it is. I was at Playpen in Philadelphia like 2 years ago with Penny Candy, with my director, Derek Sanders. And we just like literally, because we knew that DTC was going to do the play, right? So unlike every other playwright there who was like, oh my God, I really hope someone does this play at some point, we knew that it was getting done, right? So we were like, oh, we can do what the hell we want. Go do everything. So we were just throwing stuff at the wall. And it was so frustrating at the end, because we would read the plays, all the plays at the beginning, and like see them like the different stages in the development. And so myself and my director Derek, we were just like listening to the other plays, and we're sitting there in the audience like, I don't know what they changed. What the hell did they do?
I think that's
what the hell? That was us.
But I think that speaks to the fact that, as Jonathan was saying, that for most of us and for most playwrights, that the opportunity of getting a workshop at X Theater or at Playpen is maybe the only time that play's ever going to be seen, And so you have all the, so you want it to go well and you want it to go right, and you don't want to change too much, and and or that, the only way your play is going to get seen is if it gets this workshop and that workshop and that workshop, I know several playwrights who, in contests this year, will send out drafts that they know are not working on purpose. Because a lot of times, if you send out a draft that is too polished, the contest won't choose you. You won't be chosen for the workshop opportunity. Do you know? And or, it's been such a gift having Second Thought do my plays, right? But now my plays are basically of no interest to almost anyone else, because every theater, even if it's like a 20-seat theater, want the world premiere.
The world premiere, right?
And it's like, why? Who cares? Like Tuscaloosa. Why do you need the world premiere of it?
And not to as I know we need to wrap up. Although it's tough because I know we could go on for hours. But I do think it's fascinating, especially with playwrights, to start by recognizing that we are a capitalist economy. We are result and product oriented, and because there is not direct funding from benefactors to artists who are primarily only interested with create and see where it takes you. There's always, it's very hard to find a pure sort of like, let me just support you while you experiment, and especially when there's so many channels before the money gets to you. So I do think it is an unbelievable challenge to playwrights to know when they can be in just creation mode and when they're in backers audition mode. That's because there are times, and I can say this from a producing entity, where you're saying it's all about creativity, but what you're thinking is, do we put it on next season and we really want the world premiere? Because we got to put out a brochure and get our people excited about it, and world premiere looks better than not world premiere, you know, so it is a fascinating conundrum, yes.
I would ask, I know Blake has a day job, so he can say, all right, I'm gonna like knock out that play between.
We all do, I think, yeah.
Well, tell me what your day job is and how you support yourself when you're not writing plays. I know you need money to take time, but when you don't have money to take time and you do what everybody else does that writes poetry or paints, you stay up late.
Yeah.
What is your day job?
Yeah, so right out of college, I've done nothing. I'm starting to die. And so then I took a gig producing podcasts now, which is wonderful, but there is a trap because it is incredibly creative and super generative. So I'm tapping into my well source as opposed to the corporate job. I did not care at all whether people hired good CFOs. I just did my gig.
Keep saying, work as a gardener or a bus driver.
Yeah,
You'll
exactly.
have time to think.
So
but
that's a
you'll
trap
wanna-
too, but it puts parameters on my day now so that I'm running away to write in a way that I think is useful. And also they're making my podcast, so
And Jonathan,
yeah.
your day job is?
I work at SMU. I am the coordinator for the Department of Campus Services, which what that is, well, basically I'm the assistant to the Associate Vice President of Campus Services. And basically Campus Services is like dining and like all these like business units of the university. And basically it's just like a desk job where I like answer phones and keep calendars and do office stuff when I'm not writing. Really when I'm not at my desk.
Yeah.
I hate to wrap this up, but I know we have
Just
to.
one really
Kathy.
personal question. You all started so young writing. I would love to know if this happened, if you looked at your parents and you said, I want to be a writer. And what did they say to you?
Here come the bleeps.
Yeah, no,
You haven't laughed yet, or
my
what?
mom was wildly supportive, and it was hard for her because my plays have bad words sometimes. But if everyone in the audience starts laughing, she does this thing where she looks at them and then she starts laughing, like the thing I made you laugh.
Sure.
So she doesn't like love my work so much as she loves that people like my work, and she's just so thrilled. So yeah, she's wildly supportive. How'd I look out? It's just me and my mom against the world, and she's super supportive.
Great. Blake, you said you were concerned your mom was ill, so obviously you're close.
Oh yeah, we're very close, symbiotic. And I never said I wanted to be a writer. I said I wanted to be an actor. But I had and have great parents, and they were both sort of like, oh, we thought you wanted to be a dermatologist. And I was like, I did, but now I want to do this. And so they were like. They're like, if you
Turn away from the glamour.
They said, yeah. I mean, they said if you can get a scholarship to go to school, you can do it, and I did. And so and they've been, my mother is. I think my mother has seen every single play I've been in -1. Yes. So yes. Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. But yes, she's they're both incredibly supportive.
My parents were like enormously
You grew up in
supportive.
Dallas,
Yes.
and which is not a big theater type of when you were growing up.
Yeah. But my parents were like incredibly supportive.
And I think that also we're all 3 only kids, aren't we?
Yeah.
So maybe that's
Part of it. Yeah.
You want to be an artist? Of course
Yes,
you want
right,
to be an artist. Why not?
Jewel and mine and I go
maybe
do
we
what
get
you
a
want.
very different thing if we have like
Never
7
got
businesses.
any attention. That was a great last question. The question I was gonna end the night with was, what is your favorite living playwright?
Do it. I want to hear.
I don't know. Favorites are too hard.
Well, just like
Really?
one of
You
your
guys go first.
Somebody you dig.
Go,
Who you
Jonathan
dig?
Norton.
Can I pick a dead one?
Sure.
Show me something
If they live in your heart.
Alice Childress.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
and the stuff is never done.
Oh.
And it's so great.
Okay,
Yes.
there you go.
Yes.
Anisha did her thesis, the Yale.
Yeah?
Trouble in Mind.
Trouble in
Yeah.
Mind.
Yeah, for
That's
thesis.
the one that's always done.
It's brilliant.
I special place in my heart. Read it freshman year on my dorm and wept and was like, "How did she know?" Like that feeling. It was Sarah Rule. I didn't know you were allowed to break rules and just say like peaches fall from the sky. Had no idea you could just do that. Oh, so always will have a special place in my heart, is there?
Which play?
Oh, Eurydice. Yeah, that was the first one I read where I was like, oh my God, how did she do that? I didn't know you were allowed to.
Yeah.
Yeah, so favorite special place in my heart.
There's so many, right? But I think like one that I just
Is it
reread.
Joe DiPietro? You can
It's
say.
Joe
Don't be
DiPietro,
ashamed.
right? Yes, yes.
Don't be ashamed.
Great grandmother's house. No, I think there's a Jackie Sibley Drury who and her nose played Fairview. I think I haven't seen it yet, but I've read it, and
Yeah.
I'm like, and the people I know who have seen it are like that. It makes it terrifying.
Yeah.
You know, like people are having giant responses, and I think that she was on her way there with We Approach to present, and I don't love all of her stuff, but I think someone who's willing to take that kind of chance
Yeah.
and really to go all the way is really, yeah.
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 Audacity is really
Yeah,
awesome.
that's a great
Yeah.
word for it. Yeah, it's total
How about
audacity.
you, Joel? What's your favorite?
Favorite dead or living?
Joseph Taylor
How
and
about
Renee.
I honestly, living,
Not
this is, sounds like such a dude, but I really love Rajiv Joseph. I feel like
Oh,
he
yeah?
writes about timeless things in ways that are not what I'm seeing most of out there. So I love his work. I just love his work. And he's cute, so it helps.
Yes, he is.
What can I say? He was in the Peace Corps. I'm in. I'm done. I'm like,
handsome man.
we have to wrap up. I want to thank Second Thought and the leadership of Second Thought. I hope this will spur many more conversations about supporting playwrights from the ground up around here. And now, eat, drink, fast. We have to let them rehearse. Thank you all.